As you can see, everybody, I am the law. What's up, everybody? It's Zach, the Celtics guy here, back with another video, another legal lessons video, episode 10 of my Pogo Islands creation / legal lessons. Today we're going to talk about the penalties in the Pogo Islands, particularly the Pogosian Central Island, with regards to kidnapping. Now, I talk about different islands of the Pogo Islands and the laws and the most prolific and or strictest laws based on each individual island, and I talk about all that and go down the list. You know, the Pogo Islands, my country that I created, and a society based on culture, law, and dynamics, and just how everything would be if it was up to me, if I had a say on everything, including the laws and the penalties for crimes and so forth. It's a project I've done for years, for those of you who don't know. But for those of you who do know, today we're going to talk about kidnapping and the penalties for kidnapping and what I think the penalties for kidnapping should be based on the circumstances. Now, all kidnapping is false imprisonment, but not all false imprisonment is kidnapping. False imprisonment involves depriving someone of their liberty unlawfully without due course or reasonable justification. It would be like locking someone in your apartment and not allowing them to leave. But if you didn't move them, that's not kidnapping. Now, if you were to grab someone by the arm and push them into a closet and lock the door, that would be kidnapping. Why? Because it's based on that movement. Even moving someone a few feet or even a few inches, no matter how slight the movement is, that's kidnapping. That is kidnapping by definition. Don't know based on the jurisdiction, but in the Pogo Islands, that's my laws based on that. Because if you move somebody unlawfully without their consent, that is kidnapping. By definition, that's kidnapping. So, many Pogosian Islands differentiate kidnapping based on the circumstances. Aggravated, first, second degree, simple, so forth. Now, I think the penalties for kidnapping should be extraordinarily stiff. And even if somebody was liberated unharmed within a short period of time. And based on my laws, the Pogosian Central Island, yes, the penalties for it are very severe. If a person was injured, it can include death or life in prison. If they die, it's charged as murder, and they face the death penalty for first-degree murder, which is the mandatory penalty for first-degree murder on the Pogosian Central Island, and is the mandatory penalty for most for first-degree murder on most Pogosian Islands. But first-degree kidnapping on the Central Island is defined as moving or abducting somebody and depriving them of their liberty by abducting them or moving them, no matter how slight, and holding them hostage or as a human shield or with intent to commit the furtherance of another crime of a violent nature. Second-degree kidnapping is if you hold somebody for the purposes of financial exploitation or human smuggling for a period of longer than 24 hours but less than 72 hours. Now, if a person was held against their will longer than 72 hours, that's kidnapping first degree on the Pogosian Central Island. And if you liberate someone unharmed without any additional aggravated circumstances and they're liberated within 24 hours, that's kidnapping in the third degree. The least serious class of kidnapping on the Pogosian Central Island, based on me and my ideas and my laws and my thoughts. The penalties for kidnapping in the first degree on the Pogosian Central Island, based under my authority, includes a maximum penalty of 40 years in prison and a fine up to $2 million, minimum $10,000, minimum 20 years in prison. So if you hold someone hostage or as a human shield, but you liberate them unharmed without any additional aggravated factors within 24 hours, that will include a maximum of up to 40 years in prison and a fine up to $2 million. That's the maximum penalty for a Category 2 felony. Now, if a person was injured or they were held longer than 72 hours, they were held for the purposes of ransom, or the kidnapping was involved a minor, that's a Category 1 felony, the most serious class of felony on the Pogosian Central Island, based under my authority and my laws. What are the penalties for a Category 1 felony? a minimum of life in prison and a maximum of death. So that means you will face a mandatory life sentence in prison without parole, or the death penalty if there's aggravated factors. If the kidnapped victim was injured, you face a possible death sentence, minimum of life in prison. And if the kidnapped victim died, then the death penalty is mandatory for first-degree murder, felony murder, whatever you want to call it. But if the kidnapped victim was liberated unharmed, the death penalty isn't authorized unless the kidnapped victim was injured. Now, if there were other aggravated factors that still make it a Category 1 felony, but they were liberated unharmed, then they would just face the mandatory minimum penalty for a Category 1 felony, which is imprisonment for life without parole. So that would mean that if you kidnapped a minor, you kidnapped a person for a ransom, or you kidnapped someone and held them longer than 72 hours, and so forth, and they were not harmed, but just because they weren't harmed, now you take the death penalty off the table because there were no other aggravated factors. They are not harmed. So therefore, they will not face the death penalty on the Central Island, but they will still face only life in prison, because life in prison is the mandatory minimum penalty. It is the only penalty when the death penalty is not prescribed. So therefore, a kidnapping in the first degree involving aggravating factors not resulting in injury will result in a mandatory life sentence in prison. If the kidnapped victim was injured, it's either life in prison without parole or death. If they died or they were not liberated alive, they will face the death penalty for murder. And if they were liberated unharmed without any other aggravated factors, it's a maximum of 40 years, minimum 20 years in prison, and a fine up to $2 million, minimum $10,000. But then we get into where if the kidnapping involved a dangerous or deadly weapon, even if the victim was not injured, they will still face a maximum penalty of up to 99 years in a Central Island prison, minimum 40 years, minimum 48 years if a firearm was involved. So that would mean that if you kidnap someone in the first degree involving a hostage situation or a human shield, then, and it's a kidnapping first degree on the Central Island under my laws, if it involves a weapon, that should be an especially aggravated factor. And it is. It's elevated to that of an aggravated Category 2 felony with the especially aggravated sentencing penalty ranges. That includes the midway range of that sentencing chart, which would include the minimum, which is the midway point range of that sentencing, which would be 40 years in that case, in the aggravated range, the maximum being 99 years. Sorry, I think someone who kidnaps someone and it involves a weapon, you should spend decades upon decades in prison. You should face decades upon decades in prison, and that is exactly what I authorize, and that is what I prescribe, at least on the Pogosian Central Island. So those are the penalties for kidnapping first degree. Now let's get to kidnapping in the second degree. Kidnapping in the second degree is when you kidnap someone for the purposes of financial exploitation or human smuggling. Generally speaking, if you're trafficking someone and you kidnap them, or you hold them longer than 24 hours, but less than 72 hours. So like if you hold someone for like a day and a half, longer than 24 hours, but less than 72. If they are not released within 3 days, 72 hours, then that's kidnapping first degree, and you face the penalties that I just listed and handed down. Now, kidnapping in the second degree is a Category 3 felony, and can be a Category 2 felony when there's aggravated factors. Now, the aggravated factors would include things like if a weapon was involved, if the victim was the victim of fraud, theft, robbery, or a financial exploitation or fraud. So this would include this. So in the most mitigated circumstances of a kidnapping second degree, you would face 10 to 20 years in prison, a $7,500 to $1,500,000 fine, if there were no additional aggravated factors, but they were held longer than 24 hours, less than 72 hours. If the kidnapped victim was the victim of financial exploitation or human smuggling, the penalties are increased to that of 16 to 32 years in prison. Now, if the victim was tortured or physically abused, but they were not substantially injured, they would not face a life or death sentence like a kidnapping first degree, but they would still face 20 to 40 years in prison and a fine of $10,000 to $2 million in fines. If they were the victim of a robbery or a theft, so that means if you robbed a kidnapped victim or you stole from them, then you would face 20 to 60 years in prison and those penalties plus a $7,500 to $1.5 million fine. Or actually, no, $7,500 to $2 million in fines. And if the kidnapped victim was the victim of an armed robbery, or if a weapon was involved, then it's 40 to 99 years in prison, and minimum 48 years in prison if the kidnapped victim, if it involved a firearm. And if the kidnapping involves sexual exploitation or a sexual offense, the minimum prison time in this case, under the Central Islands Lifelong Authorization Act, Lifelong Monitoring Authorization Act, that prescribes severe mandatory minimum penalties for sex offenders. So this would mean a sexually motivated or sexually based kidnapping, or a kidnapping involving a sexual assault, will involve a mandatory minimum of 49 years to life in prison. So that's the penalties for that. And then we get into when there's all of these aggravated factors. So if it both involves aggravated factors and sexual. So that means if it is a sexually violent kidnapping, then you will face a mandatory minimum penalty of 65 years to life in prison. So those are the penalties for that. And then we get to, even in the most mitigated circumstances for kidnapping third degree, this is kidnapping second degree. So these involve these aggravating factors. You see the difference here. Kidnapping third degree in the Pogosian Central Island, based on my laws, this is the most mitigated kidnapping in the best case scenario. You just held someone against their will, but you didn't injure them. There's no weapon involved. There's no human smuggling, no fraud, no theft, no nothing like that. No sexual exploitation, financial exploitation, human smuggling, whatever. If, in fact, it involves just that, but you release them in less than 24 hours, then it's kidnapping third degree. This is a Category 4 felony, where you face a minimum penalty of 10 years in prison and a maximum of 15 years in prison and a $2,500 to $1 million fine. Now, when I'm saying dollar amounts, I'm talking about the Pogo Islands dollar, PID. So that means in the best case scenario, you will still face 10 to 15 years in prison under my laws for kidnapping on the Pogosian Central Island. So therefore, those are the penalties for kidnapping. There you have it, everybody. These are the penalties for kidnapping on the Pogosian Central Island, if it was up to me. There are 16 islands of the Pogo Islands, and these are my penalties that are based on all of the laws. Now, if you want the penalties for specific crimes based on all of the islands, then just leave me a comment down below in the comments, and I will provide that information to you to the best of my ability. So that's basically what I prescribe. So, as someone who is pretty much on the left, I do in fact believe in a middle ground on crime. I think society and the legal system in general should be tough on crime that should actually be crimes. You know, like kidnapping and arson and assault and murder and rape and robbery and sexual assault, stuff like that. And I think that criminal justice reform should be applied to stupid little petty bullshit crimes like nonviolent drug offenses. I think the drug war is stupid. It shouldn't exist. Free all nonviolent drug offenders and take prison off the table for nonviolent drug offenses. I'm all 100% for that. But when it comes to violent crimes and crimes that destroy lives and have serious victims involved, then we should be as tough on those crimes as humanly possible. I absolutely 100% endorse that, believe that. Even liberal channels like Secular Talk and the Vanguard even endorse that message involving Gavin and Zach. Even they endorse this message. So I think there needs to be a middle ground. If it has a victim, then it should be a crime. If it's a victimless crime, like a nonviolent drug offense, then it shouldn't be a crime. At best, it should be maybe like an infraction. That's about it. You know? If it doesn't involve endangering the public, or if it does not involve, or if it doesn't involve a victim, then it shouldn't be a crime. If it endangers public safety, or if it has a victim, then yes, make it a crime. Endangering the public, like driving recklessly or driving over 100 miles an hour. That should be a crime because it involves an endangerment to public safety. That should be a crime. Reckless driving, driving to endanger, that's a crime. It endangers the public. It has a victim. DUI has a victim. You're endangering public safety. You could kill an entire family by doing this type of thing. That should be a crime. Now, if you are drunk in your own, if you're like drunk in the street and you're just being disorderly, then, well, that doesn't necessarily have a victim. Now, if it's like disorderly conduct, that should just involve a fine or something like that. And trespassing them, whatever, or something like that. Now, if it's like a nonviolent drug offense, no, don't make it a crime. It doesn't have a victim. You see how I mean? There needs to be a middle ground on crime. I think simple possession and minor little misdemeanors should not be crimes. Serious crimes like kidnapping, reckless driving, whatever you want to call it, DUI, anything like that, rape, robbery, assault, mayhem, mutilation, or disabling with intent to commit an indictable offense, administering drug with intent to commit an indictable offense, things like this. These have victims, therefore they should be crimes. Petty little shit shouldn't be a crime. Now, petty theft should be a crime because it has a victim. You're stealing from someone. That does have a victim. That should be a crime. That should be a crime, but it should involve like a minimal jail sentence, maybe like a few months or something like that. But if it involves like a violent robbery, that should involve decades upon decades in prison, maybe even life in prison, depending on the circumstances. When my general rule is, if it has a victim or if it endangers the public or it affects people's lives, then it should be a crime. If it doesn't have a victim, if it doesn't endanger people, then it shouldn't be a crime. We need to have a middle ground. Now, you know me, I'm further left of the Democrats. I'm pretty left-wing, guys. I think you all know that who watch my channel know that, okay? I'm sympathetic with Russia. I'm anti-American imperialist, okay? I am for universal health care and universal education. I'm for a multipolar world, okay? I endorse the likes of the Gray Zone, Jimmy Dore, multipolarista Ben Norton, the Flame of Liberation, and revolutionary socialist channels, okay? So I'm pretty left-wing. But when it comes to like crime and things like that, I have a middle ground, but I also think we should be tough on the serious crimes and the crimes that affect people's lives, but don't make victimless crimes crimes. Simple as that. On certain things, we just need to take a balanced approach, and I think this is a balanced approach. I think this is a reasonable approach, because Secular Talk endorses this, and so doesn't the Vanguard. So there you have it, everybody. This concludes another episode of Zach's Legal Lessons. I'll definitely be doing more of these going forward. Stay tuned for more and more stuff on the way, including more streams and other stuff coming up your way soon. More stuff on the way, and I'll see y'all again in the next video or stream, whatever it happens to be. More stuff on the way, and I'll see y'all again next time. Be safe, be well. See y'all again next time, which will be coming up with more stuff, and I will be coming up with more stuff, and I'll see y'all again real soon. See y'all again next time. Bye for now. Take care. Peace out, and have a nice day.